After we finished the Rocky Mountain Loop and got back to Gunnison, Colorado, we headed southeast on Route 114 toward the Great Sand Dunes. We shared the road with logging trucks and drove along a very varied terrain of plains and agricultural areas and also mountains.
We've been going through this really cool canyon where it's very narrow. I don't even know the name of it. It's not a national park or anything.
There was a sign there.
Yeah, there was a sign.
Here's a...
Yeah. We're on our way down to the Great Sand Dunes. There were a lot of sand hills farther back, but now we're into this canyon. And it's incredible how fast the topography changes, how varied it is. It's just amazing. And this is even marked as a scenic route, but man.
Situation, the joy of the whole earth is Mount Zion on the sides of the north, the city of the great King. On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand.
All other ground
is sinking sand.
We were driving along a relatively minor road, but we were blessed to find a national campground in Buffalo Pass. And it was a beautiful little campground, the cheapest campground that we had paid for the whole trip. We pay half price because of our senior pass. The most expensive night was the one before at Rosie Lane. We paid $13. For this one, we paid $2.50. The next morning, we started out bright and early, and we were soon at Great Sand Dunes National Park and Preserve.
We're coming into the Great Sand Dunes.
There's people all over.
People climbing all over them. Is this it?
Yeah.
This is the parking.
This unusual configuration of mountains and sand dunes comes because sand collected, blown by the wind from the San Juan Mountains on the west, which we just drove through, and the Sangre de Cristo Mountains on the east. Sand and sediments from both ranges washed into a huge lake, once covering the valley floor. As the lake reduced, the southwesterly winds which are prevailing bounced the sand grains to be piled beneath the San de Cristos or washed back toward the valley floor. Northeasterly storm winds blast through these mountain passes, piling the dunes back on themselves and creating North America's tallest dunes. We are still very high in altitude here. The elevations of the dunes and mountains range from 7,500 to nearly 14,000 feet. We chose not to climb very far past the base of the dunes, but if you'd like to see how big they are, look for Great Sand Dunes on YouTube, and you'll find a video of a couple that spent the night on the dunes. It's really interesting. There's a lot to do and see here. This is a video of kind of a panorama of the sand dunes. They're quite long, and they run along the side of the mountains like this. They're not as interesting as Sleeping Bear, but it's interesting that you can see the whole range. Although
I'm sure if we had walked to the top, we could have seen a lot more of it. But there's no Lake Michigan on the other side, so why bother? Look, they put a windmill right in the middle of the road. Gonna chop everybody in half.
If we don't pay the fine, we don't get through. We gotta time it exactly right.
Like the choppers in Galaxy Quest.
Yes.
Here it comes, it's gonna chop us. Well, we made it through, but now they've multiplied.
Just before we left Colorado for Kansas, we stopped at Lamar, Colorado, where we saw this unusual petrified wood building. It says it's 175 million years old, but obviously the building isn't that old, and I'm not sure the petrified wood is either. We also saw this Madonna of the Trail, a memorial to the pioneer mothers from covered wagon days, and one of the blades of the windmills laying out there by the side of the station, which gives you an idea of how really huge these things are. I hate to say it, but one of the less pleasant aspects of driving through the Lamar area was these huge, stinky feedlots of cattle. Quite a contrast to the free-range cattle that we saw wandering throughout the mountains on the National Forest land. We found a letterbox at this one-room school on the prairie, and that was the last thing we did before entering Kansas, which we'll talk about tomorrow.